responded to the theme by saying, Cherry Creek Toastmasters is the best, not only to improve your speaking skills, but to make friends. Would Pat, evaluator, please tell us her objectives?
Yes, I'd be glad to. Pat, unfortunately, we have another moral of the story. Heidi gave us one. Pat's going to give us another. She is speaking from the storytelling manual. The moral of the story, it is to understand a story that can be entertaining and display moral values. She has 5 to 7 minutes, and we'll do it.
Thank you. Pat Patterson. Poor Olie. Pat Patterson.
Have you ever had a dream, one that encompassed you so completely that it's what you wanted more than anything else in the whole world? Well, that's the way it was with my stepfather, Olie. Now, I was 16 when Mother married Olie. He was in his mid-40s, about 5'8", was stout, as Mother would say, had hair that receded at the hairline, at the temples, I mean, and there was, what was left on top was kind of sparse, but there was enough to comb it to the side. Now, Olie was a kind man. He never threatened to spank any of us, never even attempted. And when he got mad or irritated, he spluttered a lot. He was a truck driver, and when Mother and he were first married, he drove a sand and gravel truck and delivered it to the various construction sites around town. And then he quit that job and he sold his truck, and he went to work for Tenneco, delivering gas in a big tanker truck around town. Now, when Mother and he were first married, they worked hard, and Olie's whole life settled around working. He would work long hours Monday through Friday, and when he came home, he was exhausted and would sit on his recliner. And then Saturdays, Mother and he would get up and they'd do their chores, and they'd run their errands, and Saturday nights were always lodge nights. Then Sundays were their day. They would take off by themselves, and they'd go to the mountains, or they'd visit friends and relatives, or if the weather was nice, they went fishing. They had a passion for fishing. And this is the way they went from year to year, working hard, saving their money, because someday they were going to retire. Now, Olie had a dream, and his dream was he was going to go to Hawaii. I think he called it Hawaii. And he was going to go, and he was going to see those hula dancers. He was going to eat at a luau. And maybe he was going to go fishing and catch one of them big fish that you had to go on out there on a boat to get. Yes, he dreamed of this. He talked about it. He'd sit in the chair and he chuckled as he thought about it. He got brochures and he studied them. Yes, this was his dream. When he retired, he was going to do all these things. And year by year, this went by, and finally, one by one, we all grew up and we left home. And when my brother, who was the last one to leave, went off to college, Olie's dream expanded. When he retired, not only was he going to go to Hawaii, he was going to have a trailer that he could pull in his car, and he was going to drive down to Phoenix with Mother, and they were going to spend the winters in Phoenix. And then they come back when the weather turned nicer in the spring, and they spend summers in Denver, and then they would go off to maybe Pennsylvania in the fall when the leaves turned and it was at its prettiest. And they'd visit Mother's relatives, and then they'd come back and they'd repeat this. And it was perfect. When he retired, he was going to do all these things. Well, and year after year went by, and finally, Olie retired. And he went out, and within a couple of weeks, he had that trailer. And they went up to the mountains, and there they camped, and they went fishing, and they had a great time. And then when the aspens turned in the fall, they went to Phoenix. And 6 weeks later, Olie woke up and he wasn't feeling so good. And the next day, he wasn't feeling any better. And so he decided he better return home, because if he was going to be sick, he'd rather be sick in the big house than in that little trailer. So they hitched it up and they went off. They came back to Denver. And they got back here just at the start of a snowstorm. And they pulled in, they heated up the house. The next day, Olie got up, and like a good homeowner, he went out and he shoveled the walk. And Olie had a massive heart attack. And it wiped out 85% of his heart. And the damage was permanent. And the camper trailer had to go. Now, Olie could get over the thought of losing the camper trailer, because he had his dream. He was going to go to Hawaii. And so, he would, every day, he got up and he walked a block up the street and a block back. He was going to build up his strength. He was going to go to Hawaii. But heart attack followed heart attack. And he had a pacemaker put in. And the walk was a half a block and back. Then 3 houses. Then 2 houses. Then 1 house. Then to the front gate and back. Finally, there was a blizzard that came in. And when the blizzard came, Olie got up and he went to the bathroom. But he didn't come back. And Mother rushed in and she found him unconscious. And so she called the paramedics and they came. They called the Flight for Life helicopter and it came. And it came fluttering down, almost crashing when it landed. And it took off almost crashing as it went off. And then when they got to the hospital, Olie was pronounced dead on arrival. You see, Olie learned too late that you never put off to tomorrow any joy you could experience today. And now whenever anyone speaks of my stepfather, they never refer to him as Olie. It's always, poor Olie, as if that's now his name.